Okay, so I want to make a video on comparison between Jesus and Hitler, which is a bit of an extreme comparison, but there's some interesting things if you look at it this way. So I'm watching this documentary on Netflix called Hitler's Inner Circle of Evil. And at the beginning, it talks about this guy named Dietrich Eckart, and he was a National Socialist, I think, and he had a lot of ideas for Germany, but he wasn't able to communicate them very well. And one day he's in a beer pub or whatever, a bar, and he hears Hitler speaking, and he goes, wow, this guy is the guy that can convey my ideas to Germany. And so he supports him and promotes him, and basically turns him into this big political figure. Now, in his writings, he refers to Hitler a lot as a messiah who can save Germany from all these problems that they had. They can save them from these oppressive restrictions that were on them from World War I and all these things. But yeah, he promotes Hitler as a messiah who can save Germany and the German people. Now, in my view, Hitler was a false messiah. He had a lot of ideas, but he made false promises, gave people false hopes. He had a lot of hatred in his heart. He had a lot of tactics that were, destroy these people, and it was based on false assumptions, like, oh, these people are making Germany horrible. Let's get rid of them, and wasn't true. He lied. He had a false view of reality. So he was a false messiah, and he had a heart full of hatred. Now, if we look at Jesus, Jesus was in Israel, and he was there to save them, save the Jews. Now you say, well, save them from what? Well, it was a lot of things. He was there to save them from themselves, their sins, from hell. But he was also there to save them from some very practical things. They were under Roman rule, so they had this mindset that they wanted a Messiah to come and save them from this oppression. They didn't want to be under Rome's thumb, and they wanted to be kind of there to be able to decide their own ways of doing things. So they were waiting for a Messiah to save them from this political oppression. And when Jesus came, a lot of them thought that, yeah, he would be this warrior Messiah who would save them from the Romans. In the end, it turned out that he was there to save them from themselves, save them from things like pride, selfishness, and all these things, false righteousness, legalism, all these things. And it ended up, he ended up not being there to save them from what they wanted to be saved from, or not how they wanted to be saved. They had this idea, like, we want to fight the Romans, and we need a Messiah to help us do that, and Jesus was there to save them, but in a different way. So they ended up rejecting him. Near the end, so Peter followed Jesus after he got captured, and he told Jesus before that, he's like, I'll follow you to the end, and Jesus is like, no, you won't. So Peter's following him, and I think he's a bit confused because, he was waiting for this big fight to break out, and he saw all of Jesus' miracles, and he saw his power, and he was like, okay, he's going to save us from the Romans. He's like, I'll fight with you to the end, Jesus. But he didn't realize that Jesus was going to get caught and get killed, and that was part of his plan. It was an intentional thing that he was going to lose. And so Peter's following him, kind of waiting. It's like, well, okay, what's going to happen? And then people ask him, like, oh, aren't you with Jesus? And he's like, oh, no, I don't know that guy. Yeah, so he denied Jesus. He had all this bravery. He thought, he was ready for the fight. And then the fight ended up being something different than he expected. And I think that happens a lot with Christians' lives, is we expect things to be a certain way. We expect certain things to happen. And we're like, oh, yeah, I'll be strong, and I'll fight to the end. And then things don't work out the way we expected, and we're like, well, what's going on here? And then it's like, okay, are we really in the fight for the long term if it's not what we want? If God's not going to make us a millionaire, or all these things that we think God's going to do for us. So yeah, they had these expectations on Jesus, and those expectations were wrong. Jesus was going to save them in the way that he felt was best, and a lot of that was saving them from themselves, saving them from pride, lust, all these things that can destroy you. So they captured Jesus, and they, I think it was Romans, gave the Jews a chance to set somebody free, and they could choose between Jesus and Barabbas. Now, Barabbas was he had led a revolution, I think, before that, so they wanted him because he would lead a fight against the Romans, whereas Jesus would speak the truth and talk about sin, and not really what they wanted to hear at that time. They wanted to fight. So they chose Barabbas, and he was a false messiah, like Hitler. He, wanted to fight. He wanted to stir up trouble, and he ended up, well, I don't know what if he was involved in it, but I know eventually the Jews did lead a rebellion against the Romans, and they lost horribly, and they suffered for it. So whoever was leading that was a false messiah with false promises, and really what they needed was for somebody to tell them, just the truth, and say, you know what, you got to deal with your own sin, deal with your own problems. It's not an external threat that you have to worry about. It's an internal threat. You're the enemy, not. I mean, the Romans weren't great, but that was the reality they had to live under. The reality is they had to deal with their own selfishness, their own sin, and that's what Jesus was directing them to. Yeah, so there's a point where Jesus is looking at Jerusalem, and he's like, oh, if you only knew the time of your visitation, what could lead to your salvation if you could only accept it. And he cried because he saw what was coming for them. They wouldn't accept him. They wouldn't accept the truth. They wouldn't deal with their own sin, and he was kind of pointing things out, like, this is wrong. The legalism, the religious bondage that they were all under, rules without reason, the religiosity of, if we follow these rules, then we're righteous. And Jesus was like, no, you have to live in the real world, and your decisions have to be based on, real things, not this kind of false religion that you've concocted, random guidelines that, if you do this, you wash your cups, then you're righteous. But Jesus wanted them to see reality. So I've also been listening to this song called Awesome God by Rich Mullins. Good song. And there's a line in it that says, God wasn't joking when he kicked them out of Eden. And that is something that I believe happens today to people. They will get kicked out of Eden. They'll have this good life where everything's good, and then for some reason they'll lose that. And with the Jews, they had their own land. They were in control, but they worshipped other gods, so they ended up, as a consequence, getting defeated and captured, I think, by the Babylonians at different points, different people maybe. But basically, they had a good life, and they messed up, and then they lost that good life. So they were kicked out of Eden, and they were in captivity in Babylon. They had lost their homeland, and I believe that happens to people. Drugs, you can lose the good life. I see a lot of homeless people, drug addicts on the street, and they made bad decisions. I think they need help. I think, there's people shouldn't reject them, and I think they get a lot of hatred from society, but I think also they made bad decisions, and they were kicked out of Eden for those decisions. I guess some of them were taken advantage of too when they're younger, and there's always somebody that gets them on drugs, but they were kicked out of Eden for whatever reason. People with their finances, they don't understand managing your finances and the math of it, living within your means, cutting your costs. Everybody wants to make more money. Nobody wants to spend less money as a way of managing finances. So yeah, some people will get out of control debt, and that'll trap them and destroy a lot of the potential for their lives, because they just have this debt and this compound interest that's killing them. And yeah, so that's one way of losing Eden. Marriages, people cheating on the other one, they'll lose this good marriage, lose this good relationship. There's all these things that we can do that aren't external factors that can destroy our lives. It's they talk about when societies fail, it's always from within that it gets destroyed, and not from without. But with our own lives, we're always worried about these external factors. I want a better job, I want all these things, but really we need to worry about ourselves and our own potential for destroying the good things in life and end up getting kicked out of Eden. So I think Jesus is here to save us from ourselves more than from external factors. I think he's the true Messiah. He speaks the truth and is actually able to save us in a real way, but he's going to pinpoint what has to be done. We can't dictate like, oh, I want you to save me from this, or I want this. He's going to decide what's the best way to save us and what we should focus on. And normally that's sin, pride, selfishness, all these things that are maybe we don't want to recognize. We'd rather, I want to win the lottery or whatever. Jesus is like, well, deal with your pride, deal with your lust, deal with all these things that are not good for you. So we have to focus on what Jesus focuses on, and it's good to pray, Lord, just lead me to focus on what you want me to focus on. Well, what do you think is important? What do you think I need to deal with? Yeah, so that's it. With my trader, I lost a lot of money today. Awesome. And then I have to think, well, maybe I'm wasting my life. I'm living in my car and I'm doing it so that I can focus on this trader. And maybe that is a big mistake for me. And maybe that's why I've been kicked out of Eden. Maybe if I could just, accept a good job, normal job, and stop wasting my time, I would get a place and have a nice, happy, normal life. So I have to think, Lord, what am I doing? But I've got some more ideas for my trader to kind of collect some data and decide try a few things. But basically, if it quits working out for me, like for the last 4 days, basically I've lost money, then I'll just shut it down, and then that's it. And then that's over, and then I'll just focus on either getting like a normal job, or like I should be applying for jobs more than I am, but I'm not. So but I'll pray, I'll give it to Jesus. I'll be like, Lord, what do you want me to do? And I think sometimes he'll answer, but it takes a long time because he's got to wear you down and kind of show you the truth, and maybe you don't want to see that. But yeah, so be careful. There's a lot of false messiahs. There's false messiahs in the church, political messiahs and spiritual messiahs, and people that say, hey, follow me, follow my ideas, and what they're not dealing with the reality of what Jesus wants to deal with you. They're telling you what you want to hear, and they'll lead you astray, and they'll lead you to disaster. So make sure you're walking with God so that when the time comes, you're in a right frame of mind and a right spiritual state, that you make that right decision and you don't throw your life away, because there are things out there to be afraid of, dangers. But if you walk with God and you let him deal with you, then I think he can save you from that. All right, that's it. Bye.